The following production is brought to you by the Talkin' Buds Leaf Show.
Talkin' Buds Leaf Show. How's it going, everybody? I'm Rob. He's Ryan. Another special interview episode today. We have all-round good guy Kevin Michie from Sportsnet. We talk a little Leafs. We talk about the ebbs and flows of a season, Auston Matthews, Kyle Dubas. Great discussion. It's good that we talked about the ebbs and flows of the season because last week I looked at you and asked you, are you panicked about the current state of the Toronto Maple Leaf goaltending? And all it took was a weekend back-to-back to remind me and you, relax. We haven't had something to freak out about in a while. So we were due for a minor freak out about goaltending. The Philadelphia Flyers are not a very good hockey team. And we also talk about how the Leafs get dominated by the Coyotes or other teams. Well, the Leafs dominate the Red Wings and the Flyers. Yes, they dominate them every time. And listen, that's what you want. That's what you want to see. I feel kind of dumb. I'm going to be honest with you. I feel kind of dumb because I was starting to get caught up in the, the goalies are coming crashing back down to earth. Morgan Riley's back and the defensive system is struggling because he's an offense first type player. And sure enough, out they go. Back-to-back dominant wins. Depth scoring in the Philly win. I feel a bit stupid.
Well, as you will hear coming up, Kevin talks about the ebbs and flows of an 82-game season, especially one with this hockey team where all you're thinking about is what's going to happen in the spring.
So let's not waste any more time and get to our interview with Kevin Michie of Sportsnet. Joining us now is Sportsnet's very own Kevin Michie. Kevin, welcome to Talkin' Buds, sir.
Gentlemen, how the hell are you guys doing today?
We're wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us.
Happy to.
Anytime we have someone on the pod, I always like to start it off with the most, the broadest question I can think of. So That's what I'm going to do with you.
Let's do it.
We're now almost 4 months into the season. What's been your main takeaway from this 2022-2023 version of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
It's a long season, I think. And that's something I got to remind myself of every single year because the sky's falling, the sky's not falling. The goalies are great, the goalies are terrible. Let's just pump the brakes here and just wait a second. Let's evaluate closer to the end of the year. Because isn't that what we all want to do with the Toronto Maple Leafs at the end of the year? We say, let's wait till the end of the season and figure out what this team actually is. Well, I think case in point, once again, for the 2022-23 season, that's exactly what they need to do. Just wait, see what this team does in the playoffs. I think they've shown that they have a lot of skill. They have a lot to work with, but nothing really matters until you get to April, May, June. Hopefully May and June for this squad, for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But yeah, it's a long season. Wait and see. That's kind of what I've learned from this team.
It's funny that you bring up the goalies because last week it was the sky is falling with the goaltenders and then back-to-back on the weekend. And they're fine. They both had good games. We're fine. Everyone relax.
Exactly. I mean, this is the business side that I'm in. It's a narrative-driven business, and the narrative, the easy sell for everyone to talk about, because again, it's a long season. You always need something to talk about, was the fact that the goalies were being stinky at the moment. Well, hang on a second. Things seem okay. So let's try something else here. But I'm sure that the conversation, the topic surrounding the goalies will come back at some point when Samsonov or Murray lays an egg again.
Absolutely. You could throw Auston Matthews in there as well. A lot of discourse and discussion around his play and what's wrong with him, what isn't wrong with him. Is he having a down year? No, he's not. His 200-foot game is actually much better. He's way below his goal pace last year, but that's okay as long as he scores goals when it matters most in April. And it's I'm with you. It's a long season. You got to kind of not get swept up in it and sit back and relax and just enjoy the ride. This is a good hockey team that's going to make the playoffs. Probably have a rematch with Tampa in the first round again.
I would have to agree with you. And you kind of prepare yourself just knowing that that is about to happen. I think a couple of weeks ago, so I was in the Sportsnet sends me to Leaf practices from time to time to just gather sound and do chats about the team and whatnot. And one of the questions asked to Keefe was like, "Oh, do you play your cards when you play the Lightning? Like, do you show everything that you have?" And Keefe is really good at answering, but not answering questions at the same time. And he basically said, "We're going to play as hard as we possibly can to show everybody that we can keep up with the Lightning. We can beat the Lightning." And I think that a couple of times this season, the team has looked like they could be competitive with the Tampa Bay Lightning moving into the playoffs. But again, it's a wait and see sort of season every year for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but especially this year where it seems like it's Dubas' sort of last dance season going into the playoffs. So it's a really wait and see sort of thing when you go and prepare for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the playoffs.
I'm glad you touched on Dubas there because one of the topics of discussion amongst the fan base that I'm really interested in, that I see a lot debated a lot on Twitter, is the pro Dubas crowd is like, re-sign him now. Like, we've seen enough. Yeah. This is ridiculous. Yeah. You're running the risk of this guy walking out the door. I don't think he would walk out the door personally, but that's just my opinion. But do it now. And then you have the other side of the coin, which is, nope, we need playoff success. He's on his, like, this is his last chance. Where do you stand on that? Because personally, earlier in the season, I was a lot more, oh, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. But now I wouldn't be opposed to them re-signing him. I think he's like, the idea of bringing somebody else new in here and starting again from scratch just terrifies me. So why, like, I understand their logic, but why not sign him now? Where do you stand on this?
You know, well, you touched on a couple of things, and it's interesting. I also wouldn't be opposed to the Leafs extending him at this point. Based on his general personality, I don't think that the lame duck contract is something that really bothers him too much. I think that he's comfortable with his bosses at MLSE and working with this in a final year of a contract. And he's comfortable working towards the goal of getting past the first round of the playoffs. And it's very clear that he understands that that is a goal. Winning a round and doing more would actually be ideal. And in terms of what Maple Leaf fans should want, well, I would say that if the Leafs did re-up Dubas, I think that they should feel more comfortable if they enjoy the idea of having the core four up front, because the core four has that familiarity with Dubas, particularly Auston Matthews. He's worked with Dubas's camp before and vice versa. So there's the familiarity, and when it comes to re-signing or extending contracts, does that change if you bring in a new regime? Do they view Auston Matthews in a different light? Maybe they view him more favorably than Dubas does, although I don't necessarily believe that anybody views Auston Matthews better than Kyle Dubas does. But maybe there's a regime that comes in and wants to pay Matthews and Nylander when they're coming up for renewal. They want to pay them more money than Dubas is currently willing to pay. We're not too sure about that. But if I'm a Leaf fan and you want to kind of play this conservatively, you say, okay, if they extend Dubas, here's the pros. The fact that he knows the team intimately well, he knows his coaching staff really well, and he's still got the seal of approval from those above him in the organization, being Brendan Shanahan, and then being the owners, including Larry Tannenbaum. So he's got the approval of everyone in the house. So that should make me a little more comfortable. But I mean, if you're a little less conservative of a Leaf fan, you could say, oh, you know what? I think that Dubas has had his chance. Let's try and bring in some different type of players. It's time for a different plan. And I think that the core four type players, including Matthews and Nylander, they should feel good about new regime coming in and bringing in a new set of players with them, because that will make the players feel more reinvigorated when it comes time to re-up their contracts, because they'll see that a new plan is in place that will finally get them over the hump if they don't get over the hump this year. And then maybe Matthews will want to stick out longer instead of signing what might be like a rumored 1, 2, 3-year contract. He's going to sign that 8-year deal that'll keep him as a Toronto Maple Leaf for life. So it depends on what sort of Maple Leaf fan you are. But if you said Kyle Dubas is going to get extended in the next week, in the next month, I would say that Leaf fans should feel comfortable with that.
Do you think winning one round is enough to keep Dubas around?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah,
it is.
I do too.
I don't think that that's a goal of theirs, just one round. And I think that even if they win that round, it still shouldn't necessarily be considered a massive success. It should feel like that building block should have happened a while ago. So take whatever success of winning a round and build on that to win a second round, get to a conference final. I've heard a few people say like a conference final is what they should be aiming for, and I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Yep, I'm 100% with you on there. One more thing on Dubas too is he's proven to be, no one sifts through the bargain bin better than Kyle Dubas.
Yeah,
and finds these guys, like even watching the game last night in Philly and the way Connor Timmins plays. And it's like they got this guy for nothing. And he's really, really contributed to their defense core. And the injuries they've had back there and all the guys that have stepped up. We talked about a guy like Pontus Holmberg last week on the show about what a revelation he's been, to the point that some people I'm seeing want to elevate him to like a second line position. It's like, I look at the body of work and I know the playoff success hasn't been there, but I think there's enough. I like the overall direction of the team. And while the Montreal loss from 2 years ago was the one that really sort of sticks in everyone's craw, the loss to Tampa last year, that could have gone either way. Like that was not them, quote unquote, choking. That was, they just didn't get the bounces.
Yep. I'd have to agree with you there. And the ability from Dubas to retool every single year and pick and pluck from the bargain bin, going to Dollarama and finding some sweet deals that you didn't even think were there. It's like, I read some stupid article in like Nar City recently. It's like, here are the best products that you could find at Dollarama. And Dubas is doing that, but like with some sort of internal free agency system.
Yep.
Where he's like, oh yeah, I can go find David Kampf at this GM's Dollarama. That's gonna be sick. I'm gonna love that. Picking up Dryden Hunt randomly in a deal. In a deal, you're like, okay, Dryden Hunt all of a sudden is a key cog in this bottom six. But when it comes to a guy like Connor Timmins, you know what's funny is last week I asked Rasmus Sandin because after the loss to St. Louis, I said, okay, he just came back from injury. And it was the 6D that the Leafs had kind of anticipated on playing with to start the season. It was like that actual 6 defenseman that everyone thought they were going to play with. And I was like, how'd you feel about that? And he said, well, it felt like okay, but I just want to say too that Connor Timmins has been really, really good. Without being prompted, he told the assembled media how good Connor Timmins has been. So I think that speaks to the effect that a guy like Timmins has in the locker room, saying we have a lot of capable individuals in this room, and there's a lot of players that believe the pieces being acquired by Kyle Dubas fit the mold of the team and can help the team win, like Sandin said about Timmins.
100%. So on the topic of Dubas and the roster and acquisitions and whatever, everyone is sort of talking about the upcoming trade deadline. Who are they going to add as a depth piece? Should they add another forward? Should they add a defenseman? Where are you at on that? I'm been in the we need another scoring forward camp, especially after all the injuries that happened on defense and all the guys stepped up. And I think Keefe has sort of implemented a system where, if executed correctly, this is a pretty good defensive hockey team. So where are you at on that? Forward, defense? Is there anyone in particular that you have your eye on? Is like, where do you stand on the upcoming trade deadline?
I think I'm contractually obligated to say Jacob Chikrin is an interesting target, right?
Yeah.
I think I have to say that he's pretty good.
Yes.
If the Leafs went out and acquired somebody that could sit in that top 6 in Calle Jarnkrok's spot, maybe, I think that would make sense. But somebody to be able to, in that middle six, aka probably the third line, somebody who replaces like a Pierre Engvall, who is athletically this dude number is Pierre Engvall is like probably the most ripped dude on the team. By the way, he's a crazy in terms of when it comes to like his muscle mass,
A specimen.
but yes, exactly, he's a physical specimen.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon would absolutely love this guy.
Oh yeah.
But he's the kind of question like, what would you say it is you do here, Pierre? And there's a couple of guys in the bottom six where you say that about them, like, well, what have you necessarily contributed other than just being coachable and being able to fit into Keefe's system, which is hard to do, which can be hard to do, but you need some extra scoring sometimes when the big guns aren't going. So I think it would make a lot of sense to target. Oh, geez, I can't come up with anybody off the top of my head, but
a guy who can produce offense in the top six.
Yeah, a top six, middle six scoring winger, I think would make a lot of sense.
Not another Yarncroc or Kerfoot type.
Exactly.
Preferably somebody with some size as well.
Somebody who can kind of play up and down the top middle six, who would be able to bang a body every now and again, but also put one in, like a Wayne Simmons from several years ago. Something like that would be desirable. And it sounds like Dubas would be willing to pay a decent price for that, which means at least a first-round pick, even though he's given up quite a few first-round picks in the last few years. I think that he's ready to pull off another deal where that includes a first-round pick, and prospect capital will go with that as well, I think.
You know what's funny is the guy we're talking about, Pierre Engvall, like fits that mold physically perfectly.
Yeah.
Like he's just a big dude who can skate, who you think could be big enough to play the style that they need in that role that we're speaking of, but he just falls a little short. He's not mean enough. Like he's a pretty decent little hockey player. Like he's not bad. I think he's gotten better as the years gone on, but it's just, you look at him and it's like, this is exactly the guy we need, but he just falls a little bit short.
It's it's funny because every time that you see him run around, you're like, you are bigger than a lot of other people on the ice. Why aren't you hitting people when you run into them?
He's just too nice.
He's such a nice guy, right?
Yeah.
Pierre, nice. What a great dude. He comes in, says hello, doesn't hit anybody, maybe takes a chance or has a chance on net. Who knows? But yeah, it'd be nice if somebody of Pierre Engvall's mold could come in, create some chances offensively, and hit some guys. That would be a great addition for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think their fans would love that too.
Oh, would they have those types of guys? Ryan and I always joke about the Leaf legends, and we all love them, us included, but no one's ever like won anything. Yet they name like streets and after these guys, and you're immortalized forever just because you played hard.
Yeah, like Darcy Tucker is one of the all-time greats in Toronto Maple Leaf history because he played hard.
Yeah,
he hit
Wendell.
guys, and he had a season. Yeah, Wendell.
Yeah,
whatever. I don't want to disparage Wendell Clark because Wendell Clark he was an amazing hockey player,
legend.
First overall pick for the. Yeah, he's a legend, absolutely, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
Like again, you're right. He didn't win anything. Nobody in Toronto has won anything.
I know.
They're still put on that pedestal.
Yeah, and I got my guy Dougie on the wall here. Same thing with him. Love him. All-time favorite hockey player. Didn't win anything here at all.
Didn't win anything. Here's an interesting one that I was just thinking about as a trade target. What about Bo Horvat? Do you think that that's too much of a pie in the sky idea?
A little bit. I think it's a little bit too pie in the sky, but in terms of someone who could put the puck in the net, like that's a guaranteed guy who can immediately step in and put the puck in the net. I mean, and on the flip side of that, if you just watch the World Juniors, if I'm the Vancouver Canucks, I'm getting rid of everybody, and I want to lose every game for the rest of the year to try and get Connor Bedard. So he's the perfect guy. You know what? I would rather them take a massive swing like that. Like, I don't want them to go get just like another guy who like they probably are going to go get another Calle Yarncroc type guy. Like I would actually love for them to just be like, let's just swing for the fences here. But they also don't have a lot to give up at the end of the day. They're not working with a lot.
Yeah, yeah, like it, see, Horvat, I think, would signify that Dubas really does think this is his last dance, especially if he's on that lame duck contract. Does he take the swing for a guy like Horvat if he's still just got the 1 year left, or if he gets extended? Does he say, okay, let's play this a little more patiently at this point? Depending on what happens with Dubas or where Dubas thinks he'll be next year, I think will help steer the ship of the team, help steer the direction of where this team's going to go.
100%. Couple more for you before we let you go. I touched on it earlier when we were talking about sort of taking the season one day at a time. But a lot of people are talking about Auston Matthews and his performance and how he's not tearing it up like he was last year. And then you have other folks like myself who are like, I don't care about that. His 200-foot game is like, he's arguably become one of the best two-way centers in the league. And as long as he scores the goals in April, I don't care if he doesn't score again for the regular season. What's your opinion on Auston Matthews' game thus far this year? And are you like, something's wrong here? Or are you like, no, this is a commitment to team defense and just let it go?
No, there's nothing wrong with Auston Matthews.
Yeah.
The chances are still there, even where you may think that he's having a down game or games. You still look at him, and just a down game for him is just like a good game still for anybody else, where he's able to play that 200-foot game. He's able to create chances. He's able to draw the other team's best defenders in watching him. And if you look at the analytics involved, like his expected goals per game are still really high. He's still getting those chances, and he's still contributing in other factors of the game, including the face-off dot, where I think he's been the team's best face-off man, particularly better than John Tavares in the top six lately. So I think that he continues to demonstrate that he's still one of the best players in the league, even if he's not putting the puck in the net at a 60-goal pace. He continues to be a superstar player that fans shouldn't take for granted.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just think it's not going in for him. Like I see the chances every game, and it's just either it's just not going in, or he just has a weird little bounce where he goes for a one-timer and it just tips off his stick, or he's a little wide. Like I think he's had just as many chances to score this year than he has last year. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to start pouring in for him at some point. Like he's not going to be a guy who scores just 25 goals, even though he's almost at 20 goals already.
Yeah.
He's still a superstar player that is, I think, unquestionably the best player on the Leafs, although Mitch Marner's having a hell of a season.
Mm-hmm. So's number 88.
Nylander's having a hell of a year too. He's lighting the lamp. I think Nylander's doing exactly what he needs to do, where you're not asking for Nylander to be that 200-foot player. You say, Willie, can you please put the puck in the net? And he says, sure thing, boss.
Yeah.
And he goes and scores. That's exactly what you want from him, especially on the contract that he's getting. Just put the puck in the net, Willie, and that's all we ask of you.
Yep, 100%. Last thing, and this is kind of an interesting one. Ryan and I have sort of been discussing the idea of load management in the National Hockey League, specifically with the Leafs. And I look at two guys like John Tavares and Mark Giordano in particular, where it's like, this has been a bounce back year for Tavares. Not that he was still a point per game player last year, but he's looked better and he's been more effective this year thus far, but he still has nights where I feel like he's a step or two behind the play. And you look at this past weekend, they had a back-to-back. Philly is an awful hockey team. I just don't see why you couldn't look at him and say, hey man, like we're going to need you down the stretch in April. Like, is this something like, would you mind sitting in the press box tonight and letting somebody else draw in? Same thing with Mark Giordano. What's your take on that? Do you think this is something that they should start exploring, or is it just like, no, this is hockey. These guys don't do that.
It's the idea of it. I certainly don't disagree with, but it feels like it's a lot harder to implement in hockey than it is in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Kawhi Leonard treatment on John Tavares, I don't think is necessarily a apples to oranges kind of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they will do something like that, and I don't think that Tavares would want to do something like that. If you said, okay, we're gonna excuse me, we're gonna sit our captain for a game here and there just because we're going to rest him. I think people on the surface would agree with it, but I don't think that the player would necessarily love doing something like that, because a guy like Tavares wants to work through the season rather than sit out games and miss games. Giordano, I think it's easier to do with. He's the oldest player in the league this year. Whatever he is, 39, about to turn 40. So old. Look at him. Just so old. He's going to turn to dust soon. It wouldn't be as difficult to do that just because of the depth that you have on defense, like we mentioned. Like, you can slide Timmins in for a game or something like that. Harder to replace John Tavares, one of the key cog in the top six. A guy in your first power play unit, a guy who's taking huge draws in the defensive zone late in the game, a guy who's representing the team with referees, a guy who has familiarity with everybody else on the ice, a guy who works hard every night, a guy who Sheldon Keefe can depend on every night. Tough to replace that. Easier to replace a guy like Giordano. When you say that, I like Mark Giordano, but I have a few other options like a Jordy Ben, like a Connor Timmins that could slide in more easily than someone who could replace John Tavares. So on the surface, don't mind the idea of load management, but I don't think that it's as easy to implement on a guy like Tavares as somebody else.
Yeah, hey, there's no way he's gonna. Ryan said that last week when we were talking about it. He's like, there's no way he's agreeing to that, even though on the surface it makes sense and you could present like a scientific case as to how it would help his body. He would just probably look at you and go, no thanks.
No, absolutely. Yeah, like even if you brought Alex McKechnie, the guy from the Raptors, over, and it's like, okay, like this is what he did with Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors. They won a championship. Tavares would say like, well, I'd still like to play. And I think Sheldon Keefe would say like, yeah, I think I'd still like John to play. And they go, all right, cool. All right, well, moving on. We won't do that then.
Absolutely. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on, my man.
Oh, Jens, I appreciate it. It was
really
it was
appreciate
fun.
it. Yeah,
Thanks, buddy.
Have to have you on again some other time. You can follow Kevin on Twitter at Kevin Michie, and you can see him on Sportsnet and Tim and Friends. We'll see you next time, pal. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Once again, thank you so much to Kevin Michie of Sportsnet for joining us. A great discussion. I tell you, man, these interview segments that we're doing, I'm really enjoying them. Adding a new layer with a bunch of good guys coming on here to talk Leaf hockey.
They must be, and people are probably sick of me and you just bantering back and forth.
Well, that's
it's
what we
nice.
said.
It's nice to get people who are around the team, who are around the industry in here, who are beauties to give us their takes.
Thank you so much for checking us out, everyone. If you like what you see, hit that like and subscribe button below.
Spread the word. Tell your friends.
We really appreciate it. We will be back in a couple of days.
See you then.
See you then.